Musangi, the Vice Chair, Bwana Shaka Kariuki, and the CEO of Genafrica, Bwana Kariuki also, and all the executives and officials from the various pension schemes. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you very much. Allow me to call you just Musangi, because you are my friend. And I hope you have aptly told the gathering that you are also actually the chairman of the Central Bank of Kenya. And therefore, if there is shortage of money around here, you are exactly squarely to blame. And if there is abundance of money, we will also pat you at the back. So you have a choice to make there on what to do. I am very pleased to join all of us this morning. And the structure of the engagement is that I may do a monologue for some minutes, the presentation, but I think it will also be much more profitable for all of us to also have a session for us to raise issues, because I have seen the catalog of speakers that we have, and I have seen that every speaker has been given an exact topic. However, many times, from the other side of me being a politician, sometimes we may indulge so much into what we would want to talk about, and then we end up not addressing the people that we are talking to. And therefore, question and answer, when it is robust, I think it deserves the interest of everyone. I want to thank Genafrica for this opportunity to come to this very high-level meeting, and to also congratulate Genafrica. Most of these people from Genafrica are my friends, and I keep on seeing them grow every year in bouts. Last year we were in Norfolk. Of course, it was a smaller gathering by that time. And I was pleased also to see, because regulatory-wise, the beauty about such a company is that you have to publish your financials. And therefore, I know how much Shaka is in terms of the profit you made. And profitability is a good thing because it shows strength and it shows efficiency. But I also want to congratulate you more because Genafrica currently is the largest of such an institution in East Africa. The assets under management is around a quarter of the entire Kenyan GDP, of the entire Kenyan budget, sorry. So I was joking with the officials whether they want to compete with the GDP of the country in terms of the asset under management, so that then when you reach that much, then you'll be managing our country, Shaka and Musangi and also Bwana Kariuki. But it's a good thing because strong institutions are good for the economy. But those are beside the point. I was to say something about fiscal consolidation and something about budgeting and around debt. There is a very thin line between all those things. Because when we look at our budget, and I'm already at the presentation, so don't wait for a PowerPoint. PowerPoint is really here. I wanted to save on power. So that we also enlarge on some profitability elsewhere. So budget making process, how it works in Kenya, and I know you know, I'm just refreshing. And especially on the domain of parliament. In the domain of parliament, we have 3 committees that actually do budget making process. The one I chair, which is the Budget and Appropriations Committee, which largely deals with the expenditure side of the budget. In fact, I have the easiest of the work among my other 3 colleague committees. The other one is finance. The one you see on media every now and then. We are almost now starting to see them on media. Very soon, towards June, then you know why. So that one deals with the revenue side of the budget. Then there is another one called the debt committee. The debt committee deals with debt, literally. Management of debt in terms of oversight. And the reason why they are so integral is because our budget is a component of those three things. The expenditure side, the revenue side, but also the debt side. Debt, by the way, is one of our biggest revenue streams. This should be a paradox. That one, what I've said is a huge paradox. That on the budget side in Kenya, and it's good that we interrogate this matter, all of us here, because all of us has a very keen interest on what I'm saying. The revenue side of the budget is made up of ordinary revenue, which is, I will use the figures that we are using in the BPS, that is the budget policy statement, for actually the coming year. Those are the figures I'll use in approximation. And I'm saying in approximation because we may revise them further during the estimates. But those are jargons. They are jargons because when you're making budget, that is just beside a point for us to understand. We start with setting ceilings for the government agencies. After we set ceilings, then we tell them to itemize. Now what is called the estimates. But that was veering off. Then we come back to the point. So budget is two-sided. Revenue side, expenditure side. Just like a whole budget. Just like your institution's budget, the ones you manage. So the revenue side in Kenya is around 2.5 or thereabout. Then trillion. Then we have something we call appropriations in aid. I'm using approximation. I'm trying to get the figure between the current budget and the one that we are coming to. So I'll be mentioning figures that you have not seen anywhere because I've averaged so that we have the context. So if you talk about 2.5 to 2.9, thereabout, in terms of ordinary revenue, 2.5 was this current year, 2.9 is the coming year. So it will be something in between because you're still polishing up the figures. Then after that, there is appropriations in aid, which you know is what we collect and use the source. That is around 400 billion, give or take, approximation again. And then there is grants, 40 to 50 billion shillings. Then the other one is deficit. That's why I'm saying, I'm calling deficit a revenue stream. It is around 720 billion shillings. And as I say that figure, I'm saying it proudly, imagine, because you have climbed down. It has been higher, both in terms of the compact figure and as a share of GDP. So imagine now the chairman of budget is proudly saying our deficit is only 720 billion. Only. And that is part of the topic that I was requested to speak about. Now, on the expenditure side, there is what the national government will spend. Expenditure by the national government, both recurrent and development. For the coming financial year is around 2.56 trillion. Roughly. It will change because we are still polishing the document. Now, the monies we give to our counties will be around 390 to 400 billion. We are still negotiating. It will be around 390 to 400 billion. Now, this is the other one now. That is part of what we are talking about this morning. Something we call CFS, Consolidated Fund Services, has now become the largest single budget item in the country. The financial year we are going into, we are budgeting for 1.2 trillion shillings in CFS. And out of that, imagine, 1.08 trillion, that may not change because the dynamics around it are not changed. That's why I'm saying them solid figures. So CFS is around 1.2 trillion. Out of which around 180 billion goes into pensions for the civil servants. And you already know there is a new pension scheme for the civil servants. And then 1.08 trillion is going into the payment of interest rates. You can imagine. And out of which, over 750 billion shillings, actually slightly more, is going into the payment of interest rates for domestic liabilities that the government has in terms of domestic debt. The other slice is the one that is going into the foreign debt. Those figures, maybe they make sense to all of us here, but it forms the basis of our presentation this morning. Fiscal consolidation. What is it and what are we doing about it? Because I want to address the issues that needed to be addressed first before I even go to my own things, so that we make sense of this morning. So the things I'm talking about are the ones that I was to speak about, and it's good that I speak about them. Fiscal consolidation is basically saying we are living a lie. Sitting in a house and say, you guys, we need to be realistic. Why? The projection that we are, budget is a projection. Even in your companies, budgets are projections. Because budget is if you want a solid budget, is when you have all the money on the table. Not the money you will collect or the profit you earn. A compact budget is when you have the money on the table. Unfortunately, those budgets never exist, either in companies, in households, or in a country. Because even a household budgets for the money they anticipate to get, and then program their consumption around that. Now, our projection as a country, and we are having a very candid conversation because maybe the presentation is also to guide us in making investment decisions that we are making in our various institutions. So, if you try to check the amount of money KRA collected and the projection for this financial year, they have a kibarua. They have some work to do. We have put a lot of issues around revenue raising measures, but they have some heavy lifting to do. Because if you want them to collect 2.9 trillion shillings in the coming financial year, and then you have to make the same with the actual collections for this financial year that we are exiting, you'll see there is some work to be done. So, fiscal consolidation has been a topic, almost banal now, because every time, I'm sure you have heard this word from every single permanent secretary or principal secretary in Treasury over the years of your operations in your various institutions. But then this time, we want to bite the bullet and do the right thing. And that is why, by the way, the figures I was talking about in terms of ranges, we made a BPS, budget policy statement, of around 1.1 trillion. But in the estimate, we are cutting down. We are cutting down our budget to around 3.8 to 3.9 trillion. So why am I mentioning these figures? Fiscal consolidation comes with, it's synonymous with the size of the budget. So what we are doing is that we are looking inwards and speaking in a manner that everyone will want to have a reality in our budget. Why am I saying these things? The 1.5 year or going to 2 years I've been in the Budget and Appropriations Committee. I have seen there are two budgets in Kenya. Two very important budgets. One is the one we make in the committee and Parliament approves and the President signs. That is the budget we know. But the main budget in Kenya is something called exchequer. That is the main budget. You know, the budget we make itemizes the kind of things the country will be doing. Around here, a bridge, payment of these salaries, and this and this. But after 30th of June, whatever was in that budget lapses if it hadn't received money from the exchequer. So the exchequer is actually the main budget, because you may itemize the things you want to do, but if that money is not released by the National Treasury, by the exchequer, by 30th of June, that budget was just on paper. There is no budget there. It was on paper only. I'm combining so many things together. So that is the reason why we are interrogating ourselves and deciding, let us make a budget that matches the exchequer. The reason why some money lapsed after 30th June is because there was no money to fund those items. When you budget in the budget 4 trillion, and the only money the country can get, whether in ordinary revenue, in borrowing, in A&A, and in grants, because there are only 4 areas that we get money. If it doesn't match with the exchequer, what is budgeted doesn't match with the exchequer, then what is there in between lapses, and therefore there was no need even of actually budgeting for it. So that is why we are saying now this time, this issue about fiscal consolidation. We are saying, who are we lying to? Who? Is it pension funds that we are lying to? Looking at you when I'm here, I don't see anyone here who I can lie to. You are too smart and intelligent for us to do that. Is it the Kenyan people? The Kenyan people are very intelligent nowadays, and especially with the kind of information that we have and the channels of information. So what is it for? Whose comfort is it that we make a budget that is alive? Whose comfort? Who does it help? Then no one. So then, let us come back and say, this is our actual revenues. And if these are our actual revenues, let us match those revenues with the expenditure side. And in other words, that is what we are calling now fiscal consolidation, because we want to be more real. So which are the areas as we do fiscal consolidation? The low-lying fruits. I always joke with the various accounting officers in the MDAs, Ministries, Departments, and Agencies. If you have an item in your budget called hospitality, you better change the name, or it is a low-lying fruit. If you have an item called anything around, like where we are now today, if you are in government and I see something like this, low-lying fruit, I'll tell them go to KSG in Nairobi. Not because we want to, but because we have seen. Look at it this way. And Paul, I'm talking so many things together at the same time. Now, look at it this way. National government expenditure. When it is 2.5 trillion, like the financial year that we are almost headed to. Actually, let me use this current financial year. This one we are exiting. Around 2.5 trillion expenditure by the national government. Listen to this. 1.5 trillion is recurrent. And therefore development is what is there now, 700 to 800 billion. Many times I ask myself, why does the government exist? That's what I ask myself. Why does the government exist? Is it to serve the machinery of government or to offer service? Why do we collect taxes? Is it to serve the taxpayers or to serve the machinery of bureaucracy? Because 800 billion development versus 1.5 trillion shillings in recurrent. It's okay. In part of the recurrent is what we call social investment, like education, like health. It is okay. But the money we pay for salaries every year, 600 to 700 billion. National government without counties, without parastatus. Then, something else. When we talk about fiscal consolidation, what do we target, or what is targeted? There are things in the budget that are sacrosanct. Remember, I talked about things about CFS, development, etc. In the order of budget implementation, CFS takes number one. CFS takes precedence. Before anything else is done in the country in terms of money, have you paid pensioners? Have you paid commissions? That is the constitutional commissions. And have you serviced the debt? That is the question number one. So when in the budget implementation, CFS money gets released first. Second, PE, personal emoluments. And there is a reason I'm saying this, so that you see what actually fiscal consolidation means. You know, fiscal consolidation is cutting, in other words. It is just cutting. So, we want to isolate what gets cut or does not get cut. Literal translation. So, on this side, there is CFS. Don't talk about it. It is non-negotiable. And that is why you remember some time back last year, salaries delayed. Because salaries come number two. Number one had to be serviced first, which is CFS. So you pay interest rates, you pay CFS. Second, PE, personal emoluments. So that is the number two thing we pay. Because you can imagine a government where teachers have not been paid, civil servants have not been paid. Three is recurrent. Recurrent non-salary. Or recurrent non-PE. Because PE incorporates even the deductions. So, what is that? Money for example, for basic education, the one we pay capitation, that is also falls under recurrent, and now the rest. The last thing that the government pays, the last, is development. That is the money that gets released when every other person is not so sad. When every other person, in government I've seen, it's very hard to get somebody who is so happy, because even when they are happy, they don't want to show you they are happy, so that you don't target them the next time. So, where you get, when you now satisfy or barely satisfy CFS, you barely satisfy PE, you barely satisfy recurrent, that is when now you remember there is something called development, and then you pay. And that is the reason you always see our country, maybe that's something we may need to change in future. The impetus of our country, if you try to see, unajua kuna joto ya economy, you always feel it. When there is money, you can tell. Kuna kajoto kana kujaga in the economy, you feel. It usually comes in the second half of the financial year. Why? Remember the revenue side of the budget. Ordinary revenue, A, deficit. Deficit is so big. It is like 2/5 or thereabout, maybe maybe a quarter or thereabout. So, When we make our budget and the implementation starts on the 1st of July, we are sure KRA will collect money 1st of July. ANA will be collected 1st of July. The only two things we are never sure is borrowing and these are the small money that we get from our development friends, grants. Those are the only money. Let me use the Kenyan term, unategea tu. Unategea as ukifanya mikakati. Sio kutegea like aimlessly, because you've already calculated. But it's not dependent on you. You know there is revenue that is dependent on you. There are others that you are a victim of circumstance. So, by the time you negotiate with your creditors, the first 3 months are over. But the government is not waiting for you. So the ordinary revenue is servicing recurrence, which can't wait. You can't tell a person, you know, we are in November, we'll be paying you lump sum of your salary in June. You know, there's no such a talk. But for a person with a contract, you tell them, you continue working on this road, tunakufikiria sana, tunafanya kitu, we'll pay you very soon. Bado wanajenga kilomita 1, 2, 3. So that's why you usually see the economy is always dull from July up to December, by the way. Because in the first 6 months, there is no money to pay development. We are still servicing recurrent. Why? This big hole of deficit is by law. Deficit finances development. And if you check, when there is a development budget of 800 billion, and then there is deficit of 720 billion, let me say it slowly so that you see what I'm saying. Deficit, by law, cannot fund recurrent. That's step number 1. Suppose, like around where we are, it is 720 billion. Let me pause there. 720 billion shillings. But the entire development budget for a country is, let's say, 850 billion. Let me also pause there so that you see what I mean. I am trying to mean. So our deficit is 720. Our development expenditure is 850. Can anyone tell me the kind of point I'm trying to put across? By law, deficit cannot fund recurrent. So the money we borrow is what we are calling deficit, in other words. In a financial year where deficit is 720 billion, pause there, that is deficit. And it can't fund recurrent. So it can only fund development. And it rarely comes in the first 6 months of the financial year. Then on this other side, the entire development budget for a country is 850 billion. So what does that mean? In the first 6 months all the way, the only money available the government to raise for development is that niyo iko katikati. That is the reason why there is usually no much activity in terms of payments, in terms of jobs or economy, the first 6 months, because I can tell you even this financial year, development expenditure that was released from July to December is below negligible. Because of those arithmetics. Because it's upon that time then, either loan mulikuwa muna negotiate, mumesign, so it has started trickling in. Those are the dynamics. Now, heading bill is some of the other issues that I was to mention before I go to the concluding remarks. This is the point about Kenya. Let's just be factual. And allow me to use a household semantics or households example. Kenya is a household. So let us call it Mama Jane household. That is a Kenyan economy. Because, you know, we theorize so many things, but GDP is a summation of households. Kenya is a summation of households. So, Baba Jane has a plot in Thika. Not the one that got flooded. He has another one in Githurai and another one on Congo Road. And the last one in Voi. This plot he never bought. Never bought. He bequeathed. He got it. They were bequeathed to Baba Jane by his father. The plot in Thika was given by his father, in Githurai by his father, in Voi by his father, and on Congo Road by his father. This is inheritance. Mama Jane and Papa Jane, as a household, they decide we cannot be poor when we have all these things. We have to do something about it. And Mama Jane, and I can see our ladies, I think that's what you do by the look of how you are looking at me. Una presa Papa Jane kidogo. Namwambia, think like, let me not finish. Like other, I can hear already. So, we need income streams, we need money, know what to do. Baba Jane, by pressure of things, he is a person of just modest means. He's able to take his children to the local public school, and they are able to wear socks and shoes. They are good. Because in a public school, a lot is paid for by government. But then, ambition kicks in. But ambition that cannot be fulfilled organically. There has to be some exogenous variables for this well to be unlocked. So this exogenous variable is something called a bank. Bank A, Bank B, Bank C. I will not mention them. So Baba Jane, to please the household that they can do better, anakumbuka hiyo plot ya Thika. He goes to one of the local banks in Thika, talks to the branch manager, nipatie loan, nataka kujenga flat kubwa sana hapa Thika. Because how can I be poor and I have all this money? So the local bank there, let me actually use them. Equity Bank Thika gives Baba Jane money. How much? 100,000 shillings. Ati tumekufanyia, after analyzing you, this is the match, 100,000. Baba Jane is excited, goes to Juja for Kwale, takes ile mawe ya darugo, inawekwa kwa plot. Mama Jane over the weekend, come, you'll see your mama. Anatembea, hii ndio mawe tunajenga plot hapa. Baba Jane then remembers, na anaweka mafundi Monday, mafundi moja na mtia mkono moja. Na ni furati kubwa because hataki pressure mo. Fundi moja, mtia mkono moja. Na amenunua kakoto kidogo kamchanga, kanyumba wanaanza msingi. Hapo katikati wanaona we can be rich together all the time. Yani pamoja haraka haraka. Hii Thika will take time, but we have another plot in Githurai. Let's go there. Githurai there is a cooperative bank. Then Baba Jane goes to cooperative bank Githurai. He brought the young manager. Ni peron, nataka nijenge. Managers yako hapo kukopesha. Papa, according to this plot, according to your income streams, you are qualified for 80,000. Anapewa 80,000 shillings. And ile mtu wake wa mchanga, mwaga mchanga hapa Githurai na mawe lori mbili na kakoto nusu lori. Natafuta fundi hapo Githurai na mtu ya mkono. They start working on the building in Githurai. Then Baba Jane says, Mama Jane, if you finish even the Congo Road one, the rent will be so much. Baba Jane goes to Congo Road. There is another bank there called KCB. KCB, give me a loan. I have a plot here. And they get 145,000. Lori mbili ya mawe, kakoto mchanga, nini, fundi moja, mtu moja ya mkono. Na ile plot ya Voi, anachukua SGR Voi. Bank manager wa Voi, cooperative news another bank. Absa is there. So, niko na plot hapa manager, nipe pesa 180,000. Weka mawe, weka kakoto, fundi moja, one person ya mkono. That is how our economy ran. I don't need to say more. We need a road in Nyamira. Take a contractor, show them the site, start. We need a road in Moranga. Put a contractor, pay them 10% deposit, start. After 6 months, Equity Bank Vika, Baba Jane, tunakupigia simu kutoka bank, unaanza kulipa next month. Yule wa Congo Road, after 1 month, Baba Jane, we want to auction your plot. You have not been servicing. This is the point. You start a house in Thika, in Africa, 2 courses. 2 courses you can't rent. You can't take a tenant, nimejenga nyumba kuja urent, akifika, iko possibility. Atirenti hiyo nyumba. The utility of a public project is gotten at its completion. When I'm building a classroom in Kiharu, it is still a site until it has a roof and dirisha, it is occupiable. That is the only point utility by the people of Kiharu starts. Utility does not start by starting the project. It starts by finishing the project. Now, we are building one of the Mau Mau roads in Kiharu, for example. There is a section of 7 kilometers. Now, that 7 kilometers in Kiharu, in this race, the contractor was paid 10% deposit, excavated, was paid even for that work. Then, government has no money, and it has rained. A year down the line, it is still raining. You can't put gravel on that road, but because that road has a contract. But then, the utility by the people of that place is not by excavating the road, it is by applying tarmac. In fact, they tell you, afadhali hungeiguza ikebaki vile ilikuwa, kwa sababu ilikuwa na gravel. Hata hii plot ya Thika, afadhali hungeguza, ungekodesha mtu ikue site, aweke kama site wa mtu contractor, aweke site, akupe kitu. Ungekodesha mtu wa car wash. Now you have excavated, there is some material there, mtu afadhali hungeguza kitu. Now that is Kenya. We took obligations from anyone who was willing to give us money. You go to the international market, anyone with money, please come, we can give you double digit. Anyone with, especially project finance, which has become a very dangerous thing, please give us money, build us SDR. So we got so many obligations, and that is the point of the matter. That is what is petty bill is all about. And now, in terms of fiscal consolidation, what have we said? Before you even think about the plot in Voi, can you complete the Thika one first? So that at least you start getting rent. Out of that rent, you supplement your other income. Then you build the Gong Road one. And then once you finish the Gong Road one, you have rent from Gong Road and from Thika. Go to Githurai and build the other flat. And then after that, on your way to holiday in Mombasa, pass by Voi, start the Voi one. But Kenya started all of them together. That is why we have a gridlock of pending bills and a gridlock of stalled projects and almost white elephants. And that is the truth. And that is the truth we told ourselves. And we decided, yes, politically, I want a road in Murang'a. Politically, my colleague wants a road in Mombasa. Politically, even the president would want a new airport. But then, we have the money. And that is where, that is how fiscal consolidation is becoming one of our most spoken word around budget making process. Let me finish by some good news. And the beauty, some of the people who generate the data we use are here. Because you do your internal data for decision making. All those things that I've said which are painful in some manner. Taxes are painful. Kenya said, no, please don't go too far. Fiscal consolidation is painful because you are literally taking away utility from people who are seeing it. Utility of a new road, utility of a new dam. I mean, you are literally taking away enjoyment. Has it paid off for the last 1 year? I'm now summarizing. You may have heard, but let me repeat. Last financial year, actually calendar year, not financial. Last calendar year up to that year, that was December 2023. The Kenyan economy grew by 5.5%. Even when IMF tries to revise, it is still coming at 5%. Even after doing anything to remove anything there, it's still coming to 5%. Kenyan GDP. Is it good or bad? Of all the over 200 countries of the world, Kenya was number 28, fastest growing. Then, after being fastest growing, and because we keep talking about these issues with the president also, then he told us, msiende seminar na TV kusema GDP inaenda juu. Let Kenyans feel the GDP in their pockets. So that as you say, it becomes a chorus. You know, there are times you can tell people GDP grew by 5%. Mpaka mtu alikuwa amelala na anza kuangalia who is that talking. So those are the facts. So what did we do? As we move forward, all our policies are more egalitarian in nature. Our policies are more people-centric. Why? Economy can grow, but grows for very few. So we looked at the demographics of Kenya. We see 70% of all the rural people, of all the people living in rural Kenya are in one way or the other engaged in agriculture. So even before you transition them to more capitalistic endeavors, they are in agriculture. Your mother, your uncle, who is in Western Kenya, my uncle in Muranga, my other auntie in Kakamega, before you transition them from especially subsistence to capitalistic economy, it takes time. So what do? At where they are even in subsistence level, support them. So when you see all the things we are doing around agriculture, including fertilizer, it is about, yes, food security is primary to it, but number two, how can you make the endeavor of this person in Kakamega, who you cannot transition, do better? How can you increase their productivity at that level still? Second, because it's a mix of things, fiscal and monetary. That is one of the fiscal things that we are doing. The other fiscal thing that we are doing to address all the things together is Kenya is a net importer. It's okay, we've been that way. But then what can we do about it? X minus M in Kenya is always negative. If X minus M is always negative, what is it that makes it so negative? Our number one import as a country is fuel products. Our number two is edible oils. Number two is edible oils. We import over 120 billion worth of mafuta ya kupika. Imagine, it doesn't seem real. Hiyo mafuta tu kidogo kidogo hapo. Unapika chapati kidogo, githeri hivi. Hiyo ni 150 billion ya Kenya. 120 to 150 billion. So, if we import 120 to 150 billion worth of edible oils, are we serious? Have we been serious even? Kwani mafuta ya kupika ni nini? Canola, sunflower. You can say about palm oil maybe. The oils. Where do they come from? Are they mined so that we don't have those mineral deposits? No. They are mined from Ukuchuna. So, in terms of, they are not mineral deposits. Is it doable? Yes. So if you look at our budget now, there is money to incentivize the growing of sunflower in Kenya, including we are giving seed. We want the value chain of edible oil, the value chain to be domesticated. Even if they sell us more expensive, even if our cost of production may end up being slightly more expensive, it is a bigger cost to pay for the 150 billion shillings in imports. So in the fiscal space, those are the kind of things we are doing. Still in the fiscal space, the other thing to accommodate so many people in the economy is to make sure so many people are employed in one way or the other. So when you hear about housing levy, I will not talk about it because all of you have pay slips and I need you to be my friends even after this presentation. So let me not talk about it, but I'll talk about it. So the value chains associated are jobs. In whether you look left or right, there are jobs in there. Let me come to the monetary side. I'm just summarizing. What we have seen as I come to the monetary side, economies never grow by guesswork. Unfortunately, that's what you've seen. You know, when we got elected, we used to go to Karen before the president moved to the State House, because the former president was still there during the transition. So we started calling the National Treasury people so that they come and we start working haraka haraka. I remember one meeting we went at 10 in the morning. We left the following morning at 4 a.m. And in that meeting, David D was asking the president, after now we found the actual. You know, when you are campaigning, you don't know what to imagine, so the worst. So when we saw the actuals about, this is the actual state of the country. So David D was asking the president, if you go back to elections, would you vie again? Not for the next, kwa hiyo imepita. Because what we found needed people who are not willing to just please, but do the right thing. About that, people say, you know, you're also borrowing. It's fine. But if you look at when we came in, the budget we were implementing that time when we came in, the deficit was around 6% of our GDP. We brought it down. Currently, in the budget we are making a budget with a deficit as a share of GDP of 3.9%. And our intention is to go even lower and lower and lower, so that we make a budget, if we have to borrow, very marginally. But then we have seen this, as I come to the monetary side. Economies never grow by, that's actually the reason why I give you the story about Karen. We realize this economy does not grow by, no, you have a country, somebody to do their job, you know, you have your job as a CEO of a parastatal, you minister, you have a job, please do your job, and then everyone goes, the economy grows. Never. That's what we found. You know the way in your companies also. The CFO will do their job, the person for this accountant will do their job, everyone does their job, no questions, no issues, profit will come. Profit will come, but the leakages in those profits now will get reported. Because the profit that goes to individuals never get reported. We report the aggregate profit. The one that your accountant gets, you don't report it as profit. I hope you know what I am saying. The profit an official of government gets by, in quotes, you know Kenya very well, and Uganda is here and the rest. That profit never gets reported, that's what I mean. I think I'm talking too much in terms of parables and metaphors. This is the point I'm trying to make. For a country to grow, deliberate decision making is more important than minerals. Take, for example, Nigeria. Nigeria, they have oil. The other day, they held elections. President Tinubu was elected. The kind of decision making he has done has surpassed the oil they have. For example, liberalization of the exchange rate and all the other things around simple decision making. So Kenya, we realized, will not just be around, we are leaders, people to do their work, jobs will be created. No. We decided jobs, yes. How many? Which sector? How? So when you speak about housing levy, we have calculated how many jobs. When we talk about sunflower, we are taking the entire value chain from input to output. Not throwing money in the budget. Those things you hear we call value chains. We are putting money at the input level and we have calculated the output level of the same input. It's not just Kenya. China never grew because they had minerals or they discovered anything. They just discovered a leader who was willing to be stubbornly deliberate. And I love these examples because they are real. And I read them, I make sure I forget them so that I read again. China, they come all the way since existence. They get a leader who was so popular called Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong was so popular, even it was fashionable to be associated with Mao. Economically, what did Mao do? Mao started the Cultural Revolution. Where you go in our farms in various rural areas, so as you are told, the production there belongs to government. You as the farmer will be given a share for your effort. In terms of a normal socialism command system. So how do people respond to such situations? Because there is no direct gain, people don't put in direct effort. So what happens? Food production went down in China. Then over 4 million Chinese died out of hunger. Not even 4, many. So Mao Zedong starts proletarian revolution. He's around the same ideology. Politically, he is very strong. Politically, he is very popular because of unification of China and the fact that he was coming up as a strong leader. 1976, Mao Zedong passes on. Then there are some 4 people there in power. They argue who is to take over. Even the wife of Mao Zedong was there. Ultimately, in 1978, Deng Xiaoping becomes president or leader of China. Deng Xiaoping, 1978. By then, you could have gone to China as a Kenyan, wanakupigia salute, because we were much well off. A Tanzanian would go to China, wanampigia salute. You come from Tanzania, wanakuondokea jia. Deng Xiaoping comes up with deliberate decision making that are then clusterized into policies. Open up China. industrial policies. From 1978, coming all the way like 30 years, the country grows by double digits. China leads us by multiples. Their GDP per capita now maybe 12,000 USD. Ours maybe 2,000 and something. Deliberate decision making. Hakuna kitu walifungua. Or policies that never had anything to do with minerals. The last one that I read every now and then, South Korea, because these are real examples. 1960, General Park comes up, occupies the position of the leader of South Korea. What does he do? He surveys South Korea and sees opportunities after even comparatively looking at South Korea in terms of the world. We can grow our economy through an export-led process. What do we export? He thinks, no, it's not me to decide. He forms a committee that was to meet monthly to spur exports out of South Korea. He becomes the chairman of that committee, and for 19 years, he never skipped a single meeting of that committee. They start with plywoods, low level, so that they accommodate many people. They come to weeks. They went into just normal things that needed no much technology. Apparels, textiles. Then after growing, then South Koreans have money in their pockets. They can no longer afford to offer labor to make plywoods. They upgrade their economy, but still export-led. That is why you see the story of Samsung. This Samsung we use started off as they were selling dried fish. Then upgrade with technology upgrade. So South Korea now, in 19 years that General Park was at the helm, the exports out of South Korea grew by 386 times. Then, how do they do it? Or how did they do it? That's why I'm saying it is deliberate. Then they took a different turn from Chinese one. Then they created big companies called Cyborgs. HK, Samsung, Hyundai. But the government deliberately supported private enterprise, including giving them public money. In fact, at some point in the economic class, I'm sure some of us have read, in the definition of corruption, South Korea grew on corruption. In the real definition of corruption is using public resources for private means. South Korea literally was supporting those tables using public resources because they saw those tables were more efficient than government. And therefore giving them even public money meant much better for the people of South Korea than government expending the money itself. So, Samsung, Hyundai, HK, all the brands you know, out of a deliberate government policy. Finishing with the monetary side. People are asking, and the chairman of Central Bank is here, maybe he has mentioned. People are asking, Yani, Igava, how can you put interest rate CPI rate 12.5, 13%? How? You people, don't you know about the ease of doing business? Now, this is the situation Kenya was faced with. When we came in, inflation was our number one priority. Let me tell you, political economy. You better argue with people about many things. Don't try to bring an argument about stomach. That one is usually no much negotiation because you can't negotiate with somebody who is arguing. And therefore, inflation has a lot to do with also food and basic consumerism at the basic level. So we come in, inflation was almost touching 10%. The entire world was suffering from inflation, including US, UK, and the rest. So, number one priority is macro parameters. Before you talk about the road and the rest, management of an economy, first manage markets. Management of the three markets. Good, the commodities market, which is measured through inflation. Financial market, measured through interest rates. And exchange rate market, through exchange rate levels. Those are the three markets. Primary roles of the monetary policy. So, to handle one has ramifications on the other. So, as I have talked about the physical side, about even export, import, etc. Exchange rate, because I'm talking about the three markets all together ramped up. The commodity market in terms of inflation, financial markets in terms of interest rate, and exchange rate in terms of exchange rate market. I want to give that point in all of them together. Inflation, part of it you handle through fiscal side. Like the one of giving fertilizer, you are handling inflation using other tools other than monetary tools. Because you give fertilizer, you spur production, that's a physical side of government. But that one you only mostly cater for food inflation. Because inflation again is three types. Food inflation, fuel inflation, and then core inflation. So food inflation, basically most of it you handle using fiscal tools, especially when the weather is good. Fuel inflation is basically the only factor you can play around in the fuel inflation side is exchange rate. The rest, you are a price taker as a country who is not a producer. Core inflation is what basically is handled using monetary tools. Which are these monetary tools I'm talking about? Monetary tool that is very preeminent is the interest rate. So you are here making fiscal monetary policies. You will need to lower inflation. That's one of your goals. Number two, you need to work on interest rates so that people borrow money at a cheaper price. And number three, you need to strengthen your local currency. Just imagine you are given those three things to do, and the tool you have is interest rate. You need to lower food prices and commodity prices and everything prices. That's inflation. You also need to lower interest rates. That is the financial markets, money market. And you also need to lower or to strengthen the local currency. So, and we are now talking about monetary, because this is our domain also to a large extent. Fiscal side I finished. So, to lower inflation, you raise interest rates so that you mop up money, so that people don't buy more TVs, they don't buy many radio cameras, they don't buy many phones. So all those are core inflation. Those are core products. So as you do that, because that's what the government has been doing, that's what the US did, that's what the UK did, and all the other economies of the world. As you raise the interest rate, which is contractionary meaning you are mopping out money. You are mopping out money. It goes the same with you raise rates of T-bills so that people buy them. When they buy, they part from their money. They part from their money. And I'm so sorry because I have talked so many things at the same time. Because money, when you have money, there is a transaction side of money, there is a speculative side of money. So when the government raises T-bills, T-bonds, interest rate, they are just literally mopping out money from you, everyone who is here, Kenyans, everyone, so that there is less money to buy so many things, to buy so few things, because that is what creates inflation. Now, your card. As you read interest rates that is CPR rate, it has a direct impact, immediate, on the amount of money businesses pay when they borrow money from banks. So here we direct. Now this other one, exchange rate, so that you see the logic about the monetary policy. exchange rate Kenya. Siku hizi naona kila mtu siku hizi anajua kugo Kenya USD, unaona Kenya dola iko pesa ngapi. Because it has become such an important thing for Kenyans also, which is good. Exchange rate is majorly a component of two things. Majorly two things. You know, economy, the way we measure economy, consumption plus investments from government, and then plus net imports, or net exports, sorry. Now, balance of payment which then influences the exchange rate. Balance of payment is when we buy things and when we sell things. Now, let's assume an economy with only Kenya and the rest. When we buy things from the rest, those are imports. When we sell things to the rest, those are exports. When you minus the money we have received, minus the money you have paid, that's now the balance of payment. It is a component of two things, which are critical. One is exports minus imports, which we call now net exports, which majorly is handled using the physical tools. To grow exports, to do import substitution is majorly a physical arena. But then there is another critical one called net capital inflows. So balance of payment is X minus M plus C I minus CO, both in brackets. Now that is those things you have said, those things I'm calling COC what are the things that have made interest rates to remain high. Why? In a global world where every country is raising interest rates, we have dollar flight from many economies to the US. People are very comparative now, including you as a human being currently. You are very comparative. You are going to the bank, how much rate are you offering me? Then you look on the newspapers, is there an infrastructure board? Nowadays, even Kenyans, not even pension funds, people are now very conscious about where they invest their money. Very conscious. So this part of C, capital inflow minus capital outflow, is the one that Kenya cannot afford to have lower interest rates. If you lower interest rates, when people are so comparative, and you hear even in our neighboring country you can invest still in fixed income and get more than Kenya, you move your capital, and that is capital outflow. So the reason why the monetary policy is very solid around where we are at a higher bar is so that we can be able to at least protect capital outflow. Even if you don't get a lot of capital inflow, at least we protect our economy from capital outflow. The sunshine I see ahead, the sunshine I see ahead, maybe very soon, is Federal Reserve. When they stop giving signals and actually lower interest rates, I am sure all our markets will start easing. And when they ease, when our markets start easing, you know, I don't know whether it's because of what I do, but when there is something nice in the economy, I actually also feel like there is sunshine. So when the interest rates are going too high, things look very gloomy, including weather. So going ahead, when the Federal Reserve lowers, at least by even 25 basis points, you'll see the entire world, the economy of the world will start now enjoying some sunshine. And in Kenya, it will be much better. And out of that then, I am sure you are making the right decisions, because from where I sit, we have reaped so much from fixed income now. And I think we are coming to the last piece of that. Maybe it's high time. Our stock market is quite small, but believe you me, there are opportunities there going forward more than fixed income. Because when the Federal Reserve starts kuregesha kidogo, wakianza tu kidogo, fixed income, will now continue to be decimated. the capital outflow we have experienced outflows from our stock market, I'm sure we may start getting an reverse of that. And that is why I'm very hopeful that the stock market in Kenya, especially Kenya, is likely to be the best performing in the world, if not in Africa this year. Because we've been battered by all these issues. So we all rally to the fixed income, to rally to government. We removed all our money from the stock market and the prices collapsed. As we talk now here, you can imagine, and don't impute, I am just saying as a passive investor. I'm not saying it as an investor passive, just a passive one. You can imagine where you sit. The stock market in Kenya values Kenya power at 3 billion shillings. Can you imagine? You can imagine, even with whatever happened, the current stock market in Kenya values KCB Bank at 95 billion shillings. A company that announces a reduced profit of 37 billion. Can you just imagine? A company that announces bad news of reduced profit of 37 billion is valued by the market at 95 billion. It means if you do 100% dividend payout, you recover your money in less than 3 years. Basically, that's what it means. A stock market that values even Equity Bank, Safaricom, and the kind of valuation you are seeing, I think you are the experts, but I think, especially when the Federal Reserve actually gives a concrete signal, then the stock market in Kenya will be very attractive. Thank you very much.
I'll just say, wow. He started off thinking that this topic involved one or two components. I think Mheshimiwa Ndindi Nyoro has peeled the onion layers one by one and unpacked it so comprehensively. Could we give him another round of applause? Mheshimiwa, your next invitation will be to the CBK annual conference. I think it's quite clear when discussing a subject as deep as fiscal consolidation, you have to unpack it from the ground up to understand the full dynamics. But in the course of doing this, what comes out is the opportunities that are there for persons playing in our sector. And we are one cog in the wheel, dealing with an investment landscape of $4 billion and climbing every day with contributions growing. As we look for places for this capital to play, let's keep in mind the nuggets that have been unpacked for us. So, Mheshimiwa will ask you just to assist us around through the last bit, just maybe take a few questions from the audience. Patrick, do you want to manage that? And then we can do a brief Q&A before we take our morning break, and maybe just elicit a few of the matters that are burning the audience. I'm sure there are quite a few. Mheshimiwa is still with us. Please feel free to interact with him during the day, during the dinner, and find out from the source what our current government and leadership are thinking about the issues that he raised. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think Honorable Ndindi, that was Economics 101 reloaded, Economics 102 reloaded, and all the way to Economics 1001. And thank you, you have really put things in a very, very simple context. And now we just open it up for 5 questions. Honorable is still with us and will also be with us in the evening. And So who would like to start the questions right at the back? One, then on the left, two, then 1, 2, 3. The first 5 hands have gone. And can you just introduce yourself and your scheme or organization? And please be brief if you can. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Obed Bubi, NSSF. My question is on Japan, for example, the debt to GDP ratio is 259%. USA is 120% of debt is 120% of GDP, and Kenya is around 70% of GDP. So what are those countries doing in managing their debt as compared to our lower debt ratio? Thank you.
Yeah, are you able just to kindly repeat, you are a bit inaudible at the start. Just hold the mic closer to your mouth, please.
Okay, my question is on, for example, Japan debt to GDP ratio is 259%. USA is around 128, and Kenya is around 70% debt to GDP. How are those countries managing their debt as compared to our debt ratio, which is lower, and we are feeling the heat more than those countries? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And please just introduce yourself. We do like right at the start.
My name is Obed Bubi, NSSF.
Oh yes, thank you, Obed. And the next one.
Thank you. My name is Joseph Waniki, University of Nairobi. Thank you for your detailed presentation, sir. My question is about what's your comment about the current and the recurrent non-remittance of some amount of money to the universities? Thank you.
Thank you. Just mentioning, my name is Jeremiah Kigati, JKUAT Pension Scheme. You have mentioned about fuel inflation, and I think the previous government was using subsidy, fuel subsidy to hedge against inflation on fuel. I don't know your government, what are you doing towards that? Because we have not gone to where it was, and it was your campaign tool. The other thing is on what you had just mentioned about pending bill in your physical consolidation. Pension money, especially for university schemes, is part of the pending bill. So please talk about it. The limited money, your physical consolidation, is it removing that portion of the pending bill? Because we thought it is part of the budget.
Okay, and we'll have the last two.
Thank you.
Yeah, and look at the back there, please.
My name is Simon Kamau. Mheshimiwa, how are you? We know that money in private hands is better spent than money in government hands. For example, if I'm constructing this building here, myself, I might spend 1 million, but when it's government, it is spent 20 million, no doubt about that. But now, this government is intended to remove more money in private hands, taking it to government hands. That is one, the reason. Number two, you have talked about company valuation, how companies are not adequately valuing the company worthiness. But this is my concern. This is a question I asked you somewhere else. Of late, we have seen that stock prices keep on decreasing. At the same time, treasury bills boards keep on raising. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but could it be intentional that the government is manipulating stock prices to ensure that we go purchase the boards? Thank you.
You will just allow me just a very last question. Mheshimiwa, he is around, and we'll have plenty of time after this. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Francis Kabidu from University of Nairobi. Thank you, Mheshimiwa, for your insights on enhancing economic growth, and you have mentioned that there is no guesswork, and I agree with you. We must be real. My question is, balancing imports and exports. It was mentioned yesterday that, for instance, in Kenya, we are unable to produce onions and other vegetables. You mentioned about oil and other local productions which we can really improve so that the economy can grow. What are we doing as a government to ensure we promote local production in terms of ensuring that all the people are enabled to produce? I want to imagine we are deviating from what Ali Mazrui said one day, that we tend to produce more of what we don't consume and consume more of what we don't produce. How is the balance? Number two, there's a new trend in the market, negative corruption and positive corruption, ethical balances. What are we doing so that we can conduct genuine business in Kenya? Thank you.
Okay, thanks, and please forgive me if you didn't have a chance to ask a question. We will just allow, for the sake of gender parity, a lady to ask a question. There, first come, first come. Yes. Yes, and there is a mic coming, and please forgive me once again. Mheshimiwa, you have to come again and again here. Very many questions.
Thank you. I was really waiting to ask this question, and it's related to the previous question. I'm Mary Muge from JK Works. On the universities, I know that there's been a directive to reduce the recurrent expenditure, the forthcoming budget, by up to 70, not more than 70% of the previous year allocations, that is for 2024, 2025. Now my question is this going to stifle some institutions, very specifically universities, the older ones? And are there any special considerations being given instead of the blanket directive on the 70%?
Okay. Thank you very, very much, and my apologies once again if you didn't get a chance to ask a question. Honorable.
Thank you very much. I'll also be brief in response. Both here in terms of debt to GDP ratio, I agree with you. Japan is over 250%. US is over 120%. Kenya is just around 70%. And now, when you talk about debt, there are four critical things to look at. And those are the reason why we can't compare ourselves with those countries at all. Number one is cost. The cost of our borrowing. Currently, our T-bills in Kenya, the last infrastructure board you saw was around, I think, 70% or thereabout. How much was it? 18.5%. Imagine. You know, to us it comes as interest rate or as yield. But to the government, this is an expense. So, Kenya, when you borrow at that kind of money or that kind of a cost, it's not sustainable. Externally, the money you used to pay the Eurobond, we borrowed a double digit. So that's one reason. If you compare the same with the, let me pick Japan. If you pick pre-COVID times, there is a time the Japanese 10-year bond was negative, was having negative yield. Can you just imagine that? You borrow government or you lend government for them to pay you later lower. So when you have a negative yield, it basically means as a government, you are getting money for free. And the more the reason then, we can't compare ourselves. Two is use. In Kenya, other than now that you are making debt a very public debate, debt has been something hidden in a corner. So that people would borrow money, you clearly take more time to ask for what the money did than what the money is doing. Money working takes less time than you asking what the money did. You remember the issue of Eurobond there, actually this one. That we had to go from here to Mombasa, back to Kisumu, to Nairobi, asking the same question, and we actually never got the answer how to do it. So the use is also critical, that when you borrow money, it actually comes to the economy and does the work of the economy. 3, majorly, there is a new animal called project finance, which for me is one of the areas that we must never borrow money from again. Because you borrow money as project finance or project debt, the person you are borrowing money from gives you quotation. Quotation number 1, contractor is from our country. 2nd, raw materials from our country. 3, some personnel from our country. Including these we manufacture in Kenya, for example, cement and steel. So you end up building a 300 billion project, but the multiplier effect is 0. Because you literally bought this project from a supermarket and you planted it. And the way the economy is structured, economy and in terms of public expenditure, has something we call elasticity. Elasticity means when you inject 1 shilling of public money, the multiplier effect should be more than the 1 shilling. So you inject money then from public finance with negative elasticity. Now the money you have put in that project, the value, the economic value is actually less. And lastly, in terms of debt, there is something called net off. Net off meaning Kenya is a net borrower. There is no country in the world you have lent money. So when you talk about debt to GDP, remember it captures the money you have borrowed. But if you look at the US have lent money to some other countries. So when you net off, it is not exactly that money that we report. Japan, even Kenya, we owe Japan. And in that net off, by the way, take for example Japan. Japan is the #1 external lender to the US. Can you imagine that? This debt you are reporting about US of maybe 32 trillion shillings, Japan, ukiondoa the pension, US borrow a lot for domestically. In terms of external debt, Japan is the #1 lender to the United States of America. So if you do all those net offs, then you realize the figures reported are not exactly the net debt. Bwana Mwaneki, on non-remittance to universities, that I am very sorry about also. There has been a huge structural issue around universities. And I'm sure those have seen JQuat is there in UON, and especially on the running side, not on the pension side. Let me not answer too much about the pension. On the running day to day. Universities, after the C+ maneno of taking all the C+ and above, our learning institutions are no longer the same again. They used to have a huge and dependable stream of self-sponsored students. Unfortunately, that is no longer the case. So, mahesabu yao mingi yalifikia hapo to my understanding. And actually, there is no university in Kenya that I know that has no stored project or pending bills. So the headache has been around the same issue I talked about before. Hapo beleni pia, our institutions became very aggressive in terms of expansion. And that aggressiveness also requires resources. Some went into borrowing. But then around the same time, the formula changed around admission of students. So I think that is something that I will do in justice to purport that I love a solution. I can only offer my my communication on how or what we are doing. What we are doing is that we are trying to balance universities across all the other needs. And when you put them in a pool across all the other needs, they are important, yes, but when you have to talk about sending money for capitation to a primary school and giving a university money to finish a library, then some headache starts there. So I have avoided to be so direct because I see a Bwana Jeremiah, about subsidy. Subsidy that we are told was there for fuel. I can tell you, it was subsidy that was never paid for. We have paid the money for fuel subsidy when I am the chairman of budget, by the way. In our first supplementary budget, we factored 44 billion Kenya shillings to pay for that subsidy that we are told that was there. Why? Because the country couldn't afford. Basically, that is the reason. The country could not afford fuel subsidy. You know, as a politician and as a president, it's very easy to please people. And especially during an election time. Because you can pay any cost and any price. But unfortunately, some of these things are not feasible. Uga subsidy was given. We did an investigation. We have never found any Kenyan who bought Uga at 100 shillings. Maybe if there is one here, we can reopen the report to include your opinion. But the ones we went out to look for, there was no Kenyan who bought Uga for 100, yet the country had spent 10 billion shillings in Uga subsidy, including 100 million shillings that had been spent to go to shops to check the Uga prices. That alone spent 100 million. We spent 100 million to go to shops to look at how much Uga is being sold. Naona kuna watu hawajasikia. Tulitumia shilingi So subsidy becomes a direct burden to government. And if you go back to the same discussion we've been having since morning, fiscal consolidation, you try to look for a space to accommodate subsidy. Clearly there is none. And that is why, from where I sit, even President Tino put it very well. Economically, you cannot manage an economy artificially. When you support shilling, that is artificial. That's what we were doing before. At some point, the cost becomes too unbearable to support the Kenya shilling. When you support domestic commodity prices, at some point, it becomes unbearable. So the reason why flexible, a free market is good. Free market meaning let the shilling determine its worth. Let Uga determine its worth in the market. And let exchange rate or interest rate determine its worth in the market. The reason why they are very critical economically, they act as shocks to themselves. When there is a shock in exports, then the currency is able to absorb that shock. When it is a brick wall and there is a shock, it hits the brick wall and boomerangs back. Boomerangs, to come back does not mean inapotea. It distorts the entire market. How? For example, when in Kenya we can come and say, tumeweka pesa ya unga, ya mchele, for example, or unga, isipite hii bei. What usually happens, you know, price is the absorber of the shock. When the price is inflexible, there is a brick wall. So suppliers go and hit a brick wall. What they do is to cut on production. And in an economy, you better talk about higher prices than unavailability. The oil market is the same. The way Kenya does, they leave a margin for suppliers, even the formula for IPRA. Because if you don't want to get involved, you just put in a brick wall and you say, "Bei isipite hapa," and you run. So the suppliers go and hit the wall. When you hit the wall, you start distorting the market by having missing markets. Missing markets where there are people we need to buy at the prevailing market price, but there are no people we need to sell. That becomes now a distortion in the market and is part of the market failure. Pending bill is the same about universities. I think I answered that. So Simon, the issue about stock market manipulation and money in the private hands, I agree with you. There is usually no debate about private is more efficient than public when it comes to the economy. There has never been a debate. In fact, I have not seen an economic theory, modern ones, that has a different view. Money in private hands are much more efficient. Then you ask, why is then the government taking more money from the private sector to the public sector? What we are trying to do is to put a solid base to the economy. Solid base is what? You have heard me so many times, so I don't want to repeat. In 2010, Kenya, in terms of revenue to GDP ratio, was around 20%. 20%. In fact, in 2008, then the economy was rebased. After the economy was rebased, so the GDP, the revenue to GDP ratio fell a little bit because the economy was rebased upwards. So currently, our revenue to GDP is 15 to 16%. So I don't know whether, and by the way, that year I voted President Kibaki was the president. So I don't know 20% and this 15, who is actually taking more money from the private sector. But I understand your concern. The issue is that now here we have debts to pay, we have roads to complete, we have, Kenya, by the way, currently is more or less a social state. We cannot agree here now. Kenya, when you are doing budget, although 40 billion for cash transfer, 40 billion shillings for cash transfer. You know the money, it seems little when you are receiving. Area 70 plus years and above, and severely disabled and orphans, we budget for 40 billion shillings. That is half the entire budget for domestic funded in roads. Imagine that, your 2000 aggregation is 40 billion. Education sector, which is free to a large extent, is this, in fact, the number one MDA that receives most of the money is TSC. In Kenya, the entire money that we allocate for education sector, coming financial year, 700 billion. 700 billion. That is a social investment. The money we put into health. So if you look at it to a large extent, Kenya, out of, when you democratize so fast, then people become conscious fast. And one of the economic theories you see is that economic growth has a direct correlation with the government expenditure. Because people become more conscious, they start demanding more quality service from government. So for government to keep up, they ask the same people for money. So that is the reason. Stock market, government has very little involvement in the stock market in Kenya, by the way. Because other than the companies that the government owns stakes, and they don't trade, because privatization laws are making it difficult. Government has very little involvement in our capital markets, and they are very efficient. By the way, what I said about shares was not part of the presentation. So if you heard, it was a private conversation. I was just having a private conversation with each of you, that even me now, my little shillings, I'm looking more in the stock market than fixed. Why? Be greedy when others are fearful, and fearful when others are greedy. So now everyone is greedy to hold fixed income. Then, is this sustainable? Are you likely to buy an infrastructure bond at 20%? Very unfeasible. And even if that is the case, the mathematics I do, fixed income, the maximum amount of money I can get is maybe a pyramid scheme. They give me 20%, 25% per year. I mean, logically, I'm not likely to get anywhere 20% per annum, logically speaking. But, and therefore it will take me 5 years to multiply my money times 1 only. For my money to get from 1 million to 2 million using fixed income, I have to be patient for 5 years. That's why I'm saying it's a private conversation, because it depends with your risk, whether your risk averse, risk appetite is what. But then I look at it the other side. And I use the company you know. However much I wait, if I buy Kenya Power at 1.5, it's highly likely that it's highly likely to be get to 5 shillings someday after looking at some fundamentals. How many multiples are those? That's what I meant. Bwana Simon, Avanza. Ya mwisho, no, before I come to Mary Francis, thank you very much for the compliments. The issue of balancing imports and exports. Onions we import, I agree. And in terms of promoting local production, and especially that from Arimazuroi, that we produce what we don't consume and consume what we don't produce. And I agree. Now, that is exactly what I started by saying. We decided we are not going to do guesswork again and be hopeful. You know, there is a hope. Hope where you go. You know, to go our total, you could be so hopeful. I would walk from home to our shopping center looking kwa tia kama nitapata mtu ameagusha pesa. I think that is being super hopeful. Where you literally walk, a small boy because soda was a priority or a bread. So, can you imagine this decision making of a young boy from rural area, walking from my village to shop, to a shopping center. Yani, the only thing I'm walking to look for is money this week. Now, that's just, I think it's been so hopeful that in one way or the other, nitapata mtu aliangusha 10 shillings or 50 shillings. Of course, it was not very forthcoming, but I'm trying to answer that question. We decided our country will no longer go looking for mtu ameangusha kitu. If we have a problem with export and imports, we decided we must handle it. And handling is to itemize. You itemize. This actually part of G2G, government fuel, was part of that unbundling of the import side. So we look at, because in our mathematics about the question you have asked about Kenya importing too many things, it is number one a question of increasing exports. That's the number one principal issue. But also the other two, decreasing imports. So decreasing imports, you cannot decrease by a decree, because Kenya is a liberal market. When a Kenyan feels they will wear a cap made in Turkey, it's their preference. When you see a person like Shaka wearing a watch, you told me it's 5 million. So when you see somebody wearing a watch, it's their preference. You can't do much. Kenya is very liberal, by the way, as a country. We are a very liberal society, where government never interferes with the decision making of an individual. So what do we do then? Since you can't do by decree, you do by kuzuia and persuasion that si kuongelesha, making a person see value. So what we are doing is, the side of import, the best you can do is import substitution, because you cannot close Kenya from importing. The much you can do is to build a wall of tariffs, which they can also jump over, because even if you say a tariff of 100% and somebody is willing to pay, it's upon them. So what you do is to import substitute. So you look at the catalog of imports. What is it that we can actually import substitute? And the more the reason I gave about edible oils. And so the others are the same. I will not belabor that point. Mary, thank you very much. The issue of directive, 30%. This is how I've seen the government works. This is my opinion. The president is the one who gave the directive. And I cannot gainsay the president. So what I can do is to give my opinion. What I've seen with government, the little time I've been there around budget, because we interact with most of the government agencies. When it is about cutting money, there is no scarcity of reasons. Even weather can be a reason. Don't cut our money because it's raining. That can be a reason. I am being honest. There is no MDA in Kenya who will voluntarily come and say, we got some surplus. You guys, please give us some more intro money next time. The money you gave us, we were basically never able to absorb. Even when you see in your figures, you gave them money that they couldn't absorb. They want more. I am also not trying to downplay it by saying some of the critical areas like universities could be suffering inadvertently. Unfortunately, my opinion is this. In government, when you show like there is a room for negotiation, it is no longer a policy. When you come up with a policy, let me just use, for example, a road. That ile barabara ya Mombasa Road ni a toll ni kulipa. That's a policy, in quotes. That ukikiria JKIA, you pay. When you start saying some people will not pay, you basically open that road. So in Kenya it's the same. That's what I've seen. That if you give a policy and you start saying, you know, universities are very critical, they should be part of it, next will be the other parastatal, the other one, and the other one, and everyone will be in. Maybe that's why we are so rigid. The government is so rigid on that. Fortunately, we have been able to see some of the MPAs towing the line properly. All this money we are tunaokoa, hakuna inakuja kwa mfuko yangu, inaenda kwa Wakenya, na Wakenya ni sisi ambao tuko hapa. It is that road to your rural area that will be built. It is that school that you went to that will be modernized. So all this money is for the benefit of all Kenyans. That is the reason that we are doing it. Otherwise, thank you very much. Shaka, if you come, the other thing may be, in part of those directives, take for example one, Shaka, I want you to listen to this because I'll not say how you will make the decision, you figure out. You sit here, not as a pensioner, not as a pension fund, but you as an individual. Just figure out this. Government has given a directive that in companies where government has a stake, dividend payout will be 80%. Why? One, government is never in the business of wealth. Government is not run through wealth. You can't run a government by saying, you know, we have many deposits of gold. You can't run a government through wealth. You run a government through revenue. So if you have wealth that has no revenue, it is of zero consequence to government. Government is a cash flow business. It's a cash flow machine. It is not a wealth machine. But then you, as an individual seated here, KenGen, for example, is majority owned by government. If it's majority owned by government and it's listed, what have they been doing? What has KPC been doing? What has Kenya Post been doing? They've been doing empire building. Empire building is where, because you have so much cash, you just invest. I mean, you are the CEO of a company. The default setting is the money. Sitting control is one of the hardest things you do as human beings. Sitting control, including a seat where you, in our homes, where you sit down to watch TV, when you get a person unaanza kufura. Because it's your seat, that's where you usually sit. But it's not a business of seat that I'm talking about. So, you keep plowing back, And I've told you, in this Kenya pipeline, government is never in the business of pipelines. It is money to run government. Money. But you as an MPA, you are plowing back. And your plowing back is increasing wealth. Government does not need this wealth, it needs cash flow. But the point I'm trying to make is this. You are here seated. There are companies in Kenya, government-owned states. And they are listed. And there is a directive to pay 80% dividend payout. And government is one of the shareholders. But you are not restricted from being a shareholder either in a listed company. Think about that.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think
you recall yesterday when I said this is one of the key conferences that I make sure I attend, you can see the reason why. I think Honorable Ndindi Nyoro has been more than generous with his time. We truly appreciate the presentation and especially also the Q&A, which is very, very, very enlightening. So let us give him one more round of applause. If I was to allude how old I am, I would have requested that we give him either a coffee or kilo. But that applause would suffice. Thank you very much. I'll now take this opportunity to introduce one of our independent directors out of our Uganda subsidiary, Diana, who will now present Honorable Nyoro with a gift. Please, Director Diana.
Thank you very, very much, Ashaka. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a privilege having come from so far to really, really learn from you, Honorable. And please come and receive this plaque from Genafrica. It's been an honor this morning to hear from you and learn from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much. We have all learned a lot, and we have slightly, just to be modest, exceeded time. So I'll just kindly request we take a 15-minute health break, take a cup of tea, and even bring it inside so that we can start.